not easy because we are many people in the room. It's better to be oversubscribed than undersubscribed, I guess. Yeah. Okay. So I want, first of all, to thank each and every one of you for being here. It is a pleasure for me to host this event again with my good colleague. And I do think that the fact that we are so many actually underpins why we're here, and also underpins the seriousness about the subject that we are going to discuss. Before I go into the area of type 1 diabetes, I just want to paint a common picture of where we are here in Europe, and you might extend this to where we are in the world. So, for pretty obvious reasons, security and defense and green transition, some of us are hanging on to the last subject with everything we can, are also very, very busy items on our agenda. And that's not to scare anybody, it's just to paint the picture of we might have to think a bit differently. We might have to address some issues a bit differently than what we did just a couple of years back. But that can also be good news, because perhaps there is some energy, because perhaps there is some development in thinking differently also about type 1 diabetes. First of all, to mention what probably all of you know, millions of people in Europe live with type 1 diabetes. And together with good colleagues in this room, many of you, of course, we will fight for people with type 1 diabetes, together with also people with other forms of, not diabetes, but other forms of issues related to diabetes. Be it if you are intolerant to gluten, so you know where I'm getting at. All these illnesses are in the same family. But today, let's concentrate on type 1 diabetes. We must make sure that we detect type 1 diabetes much earlier. We know we have this as a possibility. Early screening should be spread across all Europe to make sure that we detect the disease early, so that we can make sure that some of the things following type 1 diabetes is taken down. First thing to think about is cardiovascular health, which is a follow condition together with type 1 diabetes. And especially here for women, we know that they face double the cardiovascular risk compared to men. This should, of course, not be the case. So early detection and help to the people early should be at the core of what we're doing. And then, of course, we do have a toolbox which could include cure. Curing must be our aim. Type 1 diabetes has a strong genetic component, and innovation on biotechnology is key to address this. So to fight it and cure it, we need to leverage our state of art within the research into ATMPs, personalized medicines, advanced therapies, and bring cure to the market. Technology to cure type 1 diabetes exists, which means enormous improvements in quality of life for many patients and careers across Europe and the world. So how do we get to the cure? How do we make this happen? This will require building an even stronger ecosystem of biotech innovation, and that innovators, researchers choose Europe to manufacture and to bring to the market, the cure. And it will also require sustained investments, big, large investments. And to be honest, we will have to see this happening in clusters. We can't mingle along country by country and say, in Denmark we do this, in Spain we do this, in Germany we do this. We have to look at this collectively together. Building up clusters of excellence and making sure that there is accessibility and availability for all citizens in Europe. And we are on track. The EU Biotech Act must help retain and attract companies working on breakthrough therapies for diseases like type 1 diabetes. And biotech and the competition in biotech is also a geopolitical issue. That's why I also mentioned the background that we are actually facing at the moment. For European patients to have better access for innovation, Europe must become attractive and more attractive than other regions for investments, research, clinical trials, and manufacturing. So we need a faster pathway for innovation to the market. And I'm a clear spokesperson for investing more in EMA. As we see the FDA pulling back, less resources, we should fuel our resources. And, a little bit more controversial for some perhaps, we should make sure that there is one point of acceptance, one point of entry to get acceptance in all Europe. Why should it be that we have one place with EMA and then we, after that, have also other countries? Well, other countries, I say countries. That's not the way forward for Europe. We need to speed this up. And to speed it up, we need to look at it differently. And of course, we need to support the development of novel cell and gene therapies here in Europe. To put it out in short, our European Union is much stronger than we think. People outside our union envy our universal healthcare system, be it their differences, and they cannot provide anything close to our model and the security it serves to our citizens. Let's keep it like this. Invest in our industries and make our data serve us in multiple ways. Thank you very much. And now over to my chair. Thank you. Thank you for coming.
Thank you, MEP Bosse, for these inspiring words. I am wearing my green glasses, the glasses of hope. So, because there is hope. And I do believe that research will lead the way in preventing and eventually curing this disease. And this will save money for the EU because it will mean more healthy people, more people able to work, more people able to pay taxes. You know, this is Belgium, but also in the EU, and that is very important. And we should see it as a, you know, an inverted story where investing now in these things will actually bring us more means to do all the other things we also want to do. So thank you for these inspiring words of introduction. Also, thank you for hosting us in your house here in Brussels. And I want to introduce another member of Parliament, and that is Romana Jerkovic. So please, you have the word also to welcome us in your house.
Thank you so much. It's a great pleasure to be here today with all of you and to discuss how we can improve and advance early detection and the outcomes for people living with type 1 diabetes. I would particularly like to thank to the European Diabetes Forum for its leadership and also to Danish Presidency for working with us and for ensuring that this vital issue receives greater attention in the EU health policy discussions. Just a couple of months ago, the 8-year-old son of a very dear friend of mine was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. Unfortunately, his diagnosis came before ketoacidosis set in. It was only thanks to his school doctor who noticed he had lost weight and insisted to test him for diabetes. But what about all those young boys and girls who are not that lucky, who don't have someone to notice the signs before it's too late? And while preparing for today, I came across data showing that nearly 300,000 children and adolescents in Europe are living with type 1 diabetes. And what struck me most was the fact that in almost half of these cases, the diagnosis comes only after life-threatening complications have already developed. So I have to ask why, how it is possible that we are still not following the example of countries like Italy, which has adopted a national screening law offering antibody testing for all children aged 1 to 17, or Germany, which runs a great large regional screening program such as FRIDA initiative in Bavaria. Several other member states have also launched promising pilot projects. Yet, almost everywhere else, early detection still depends on chance, on where you live, which doctor you see, or whether your region happens to be part of some pilot initiative. But it doesn't have to be this way. We already have the science, we already have the tools to identify the children at risk long before symptoms appear. Through a combination of genetic and antibody screening, doctors can detect type 1 diabetes in the earliest silent stage. But the early detection is only one side of the coin. The other is access to treatment. And I can give you an example of my own home country, Croatia. We have a strong network of pediatric diabetologists, but access to modern technology remains uneven. And only around 60% of children have access to continuous glucose monitors, and fewer than half use insulin pumps compared to over 90% in countries like Sweden or Denmark. Some insulin analogs and glucose sensors are only partially reimbursed, and parents often have to fight enormous administrative battles to obtain what should be a standard care. So there are many examples such as this one across the EU. The same child diagnosed in one country can expect to live a decade longer than a child in another, simply because of unequal access to technology and care. And these are precisely the inequalities that Europe must address together. As a rapporteur for the EU cardiovascular disease strategy, I also want to underline the link between type 1 diabetes and cardiovascular health, especially through the cardiovascular kidney metabolic syndrome. Recognizing and addressing these interlinked conditions early is essential for prevention, for better outcomes, and for healthier aging across the Union. So I would say that Europe has already shown through Europe's BT Cancer Plan that it can act decisively to tackle major health challenges. And now it is time to show the same ambition, the same willingness, the same dedication for cardiovascular and metabolic health. So the science is ready, the technology is ready, but the progress will not happen by itself. It requires political will and commitment. So I really do believe that together we can make early detection the rule, not the exception, to give every child in Europe a chance to live a healthier and longer life. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. And you used a few keywords also. The fact that access should be the same all over Europe. That indeed the place where you're born doesn't determine what your risk of diabetic ketoacidosis is and what your level of care is. You also mentioned cardiovascular. Indeed, our Commissioner of Health, Oliver Varey, sends his apologies. He has taped a little movie, but for the sake of time, I will take the prerogative of the chair and not show the movie. But he is with us. He couldn't be physically, he's in Copenhagen, but he is with us and he's fully aligned. Indeed, to have a prominent place, not only for cardiovascular disease, but also for diabetes, all forms of diabetes, also type 1, and obesity in the cardiovascular health plan. So we will, I hope, with your help, keep him to this, because this is crucial. Indeed, we are now at a crossroads where we're talking about early detection, where we're talking about getting disease-modifying therapies at our fingertips, getting better care for people who already have the disease and hopefully one day have a cure. And this cardiovascular diabetes obesity plan will be crucial also for boosting that. But at the basis, if we want to progress to where you opened the perspective, namely prevention, arresting disease, curing disease, we need science. And we're not there yet. We're there when it comes to identifying people in an early pre-symptomatic preclinical stage. We are having, EMA is hopefully looking at the dossier with, you know, oh, I have my wrong glasses, green glasses, of having the first disease-modifying therapy in our hands. We have our network of clinical trial centers, EUDF, in Europe, to test more disease-modifying therapies coming our way. I'm hopeful we will get there, but we still need more research. And so I will hand over now to Simone Overby-Slot, who is the Counselor for Health and the permanent representation of Denmark to the EU, and taking the presidency of the EU by Denmark. And you will be talking about the importance of a strong life sciences ecosystem. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mitre, and also thank you to you, Bosses, Stine. Thank you so much, and also Roxana, thank you very much for having me here. And hi, my name is Simone Slo, as I was introduced, and at the moment we, from the Danish side, we have the privilege of holding the presidency for these 6 months. And my task is to talk to you about the importance of a strong life science ecosystem. I think actually this headline should be something different. It should be the importance of having access to good quality treatments and developing the next groundbreaking treatments, and why we see life science ecosystem as the solution to that. Because for you, I guess that words like life science ecosystems, that sounds like just blah, blah, blah. You want the treatments. And I think Stine very well pointed out that this is exactly what we think the strong basis should be. Usually when I wear glasses, they are the color of brown. That's also the color of the soil. So it's sort of to say, if we need to keep the glasses analogy going, I think this is also to say that the ecosystem of life sciences is the soil, and that's where we develop the science. That is what we need. That's the fundamental thing that we need to stand on when we develop these new treatments for everybody. So with that, I also have here in my speech these devastating numbers of an estimated 2.7 million people living with type 1 diabetes in the Euro region of the WHO. So that's beyond the EU, but the numbers, they count. And every year, another 31,000 young or people receive this diagnosis. This is an autoimmune disease that is also chronic. So it is something that should be definitely taken quite serious. It's, on the contrary to type 2 diabetes, quite different in its nature. And I don't have to explain that to you because you are the people actually living with diabetes. So I think you are the ones who should explain to me what are the consequences of this. And you're also the ones who knows the importance of continuous development of medicines and treatments, and hopefully the cure that Stine was also so wisely talking about. So this is where I come into the picture. I'm a health bureaucrat or Eurocrat, as boring as that sounds. We are really trying to then create a framework or the framework conditions so that we can actually foster an environment where we can develop these new treatments. And this is the key word where we have the life science ecosystem. And I think the ecosystem is, I think already the speakers have also developed on this. That's the important part, because innovation solutions, they help to ensure the transition to a more accessible and equitable health system, do many great things. Earlier detection is very important, especially when you talk about diabetes type 1. Efficient treatments that we can access all across. We need the newest knowledge, we need the newest technologies, we need research, development. The life science system also drives innovation, economic growth, creating jobs, research opportunities, investments. So all of these are positive side effects, you might say, for also addressing the geopolitical issues that Stine was also touching upon. We need a competitive Europe as well. A competitive Europe is also a workforce. So treatment, good treatment of diabetes also types into that, you could say. So there are many positive side effects, but I think one of the very important side effects also, or that's one of the core effects of the life science system, is also that if you have a good ecosystem, it also gives the patients a voice in this. And it gives, the ecosystem is where we bring patients, researchers, manufacturers, policymakers to collaborate on the solutions so that they actually make sense for everyone around the table. And we don't just go in our own silos and we develop something that at the end does not make sense in the everyday life of the patients. So this is where the ecosystem, one place where the ecosystem comes into place. The healthcare system should reflect this ecosystem. As the other speakers already alerted to, the Commission and the Parliament, the Council already took some important steps in this regard. We have seen the Life Science Strategy. We are looking forward to the Biotech Acts. At the moment, we have on the table the Pharmaceutical Package and also the Critical Medicines Act. So health is really coming to the top of the agenda of the EU as well, which I think is quite important, especially also when we look to other issues such as competitiveness, etc., but also because this is practically about living good lives. So if you couple this, all of these initiatives with a strong healthcare system, as well as our history as a place for investment, groundbreaking medicines, that makes Europe quite a good place to start these innovations or to booster and keep building these innovations. And that's sort of the focus that we have had from the Danish Presidency seats, that the life science ecosystem plays quite a key role. And if I am to, we discussed it also at the EBSCO Informal Health Ministers meeting in Copenhagen, and this is something I'm happy to say that it does receive quite some positive feedback around the table. One thing that I would just point out is a thing that we're working quite hard with, is to develop a better system for clinical trials. this is clinical trials within the member states, but especially cross-border clinical trials. And this is extremely important when you look to innovative therapies, where it might be important also to test on a broad range of patients. And we are small member states, many of us. So if you do the cross-border clinical trials, as Stine also said, why not use and make the best of what we actually have in the European ecosystem, so that everyone can benefit from this, and not only the patients of Denmark. In Denmark, we have quite a good ecosystem, but that doesn't, like, we are 6 million people, and there are 2.7 million living with diabetes. We need to help all of those. So the cross-border clinical trials, this is something that is a very, very dear or a very important focus for us from the presidency seat, and where we do see, hopefully, that the coming Biotech Act will put forward something here. That's at least what I will promise that we will work for, because in our experience, when you have clinical trials, you also have earlier and easier access to the treatments when they then become actual treatment options, or hopefully the possibility of a cure. So this is why we need to work with the ecosystem. This is because we actually see that a strong healthcare system that's based on science, where we also have a strong industry that invests in this healthcare system, that becomes a positive spiral of an ecosystem, and ultimately it benefits the patients, not only in one member state, but across the board. And that's ultimately the most important thing. I could speak to you endlessly of the efforts that we are also doing in other areas. I will not tire you with what we're doing in the Critical Medicines Act. Of course, security of supply with the geopolitical situation that we're in, it's crucial. And when we talk about type 1 diabetes, this insulin is a critical medicine. Yeah. It's a critical medicine because if you don't have access to it, it can have fatal consequences. So this is also why, when we talk about what can we do at a European level, one of the things, a Critical Medicines Act might sound like something that's very far from treatment or treatment development, but it is something that we put quite highly on the agenda, because we see that it is crucial to patients or to people living with autoimmune diseases, because you're not necessarily patients. You have this disease, it's something that you live with. So therefore, the legislative framework is what we, from the more bureaucratic point, because I'm not a politician, I'm just a bureaucrat, but we try to take this perspective when we go and negotiate these different legislative acts. So I hope that I made the bureaucracy a bit more interesting, and also maybe explained why it is also important to actually reach the goal that is, of course, access to treatment, diagnostics, and hopefully cures. With that, thank you so much for your attention.
And thank you again to the Danish presidency for hosting us. I also need to thank the European Diabetes Forum, a forum where all stakeholders in diabetes in Europe come together, and where we have now a very solid partnership with different members of the European Parliament. I want to welcome another one, MEP Niels Flemming Hansen, who will join the panel later on. We also have MEP Kluja, and you can see his picture. You can see he's a surgeon. He's a real doctor. He has his stethoscope around his neck. He also couldn't be with us, but he also prepared a little movie. Again, we will put hopefully the taping of this meeting together with all the movies on the website of EUDF, and also on the second entity that helped organize this meeting, and that is Identify. And Identify is a European consortium, an IHI project consortium that is our host, and that has as the topic, thank you very much, to investigate how could we roll out screening early detection of type 1 diabetes in the different European countries with our different healthcare systems. So, Kasia, we are behind in time, so I'm going to ask you to put your little antennas up and watch me every time I do this and get me another slide. So we heard these numbers before, and indeed numbers are impressive if you look at our European area when it comes to people diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. And what you see is that numbers are growing. Numbers are growing on the one hand in prevalence, and that's a good thing because it means that people with type 1 diabetes are now living longer lives, and that's good. But it also means we are diagnosing more and more people with type 1 diabetes, and it's becoming a more aggressive disease. Earlier ages, young people now under the age of 5 being diagnosed. But we also shouldn't forget that half of the people are diagnosed with type 1 diabetes after 18 years of age. And so when we think type 1 diabetes is a disease of children and adolescents, yes, but also young adults and even older adults are affected. And next slide shows you that we shouldn't forget that behind these numbers, there are people. And there are people living with this disease, there are families living with this disease, friends living with this disease, colleagues living with this disease. Type 1 diabetes is a disease that gets under your skin. Insulin gets under your skin, but also this disease. Also, as a doctor, I know very few diseases where doctors are so motivated, like type 1 diabetes. Next slide. So we shouldn't forget that it was only in 1922, next slide, where the first clinical use of insulin was made possible. And until then, type 1 diabetes was a lethal disease. But we have come a long way. Lessons, again, in humility when we think of how these young people needed to be treated many, many years ago. We have sensors, we have insulin analogs, we have pumps, intelligent pumps, next slide, and things are improving. Here you can see in different colors hemoglobin A1C over different ages in a Belgian population. And you see that if you look at the colors, and in green is the most recent color, it's unpublished, it's very recent data, 2024, you see that hemoglobin A1C levels are coming down all over the ages. And that is thanks to the introduction of better insulins, but especially also the glucose sensors and the smart pumps. And on the right-hand side, you see something that has just been published, where we looked at what is now the impact of this better hemoglobin A1C, for instance, on retinopathy in blue and nephropathy in red. And so group A is a group of people who were diagnosed end of the 80s, beginning of the 90s. And group B is a group of individuals who were diagnosed in the nillies. And you see that, indeed, 15 years after your diagnosis, the chances of having retinopathy or nephropathy are going down. Yes, treatments are getting better, but they should get better, not only in Belgium, but all over Europe. Next slide. And we also shouldn't forget that, yes, things are getting better, but first of all, it remains a disease that is not pleasant. But second, also, that it still kills people. When you're diagnosed as a little boy under the age of 10, you lose 14 years of your life. If you're diagnosed as a little girl under the age of 10, you lose more than 17 years of your life. This is due to the chronic complications that I showed you, and things are getting better. But we shouldn't forget, it's also due to acute complications. Hypoglycemia. All the doctors here all know people that we lost due to hypoglycemia. We want to push their glucose levels down to avoid the chronic complications. But even with the best treatments, sometimes a severe hypo happens. But also ketoacidosis, and unfortunately, especially at the time of diagnosis. Kasia? So these pictures of children dying in ketoacidosis in 1922, we shouldn't forget that even in Europe, these are data from the US. Don't look at it. They have not a good healthcare system. We have the best. But even in Europe, I can tell you in EUDF, our European project, the old IHI project, we found that under the age of 18, 44% of all new diagnosed children were diagnosed with diabetic ketoacidosis. And also, 23% of all young adults diagnosed with type 1 diabetes were in ketoacidosis. And in a country like Belgium, we lose 1, 2, in bad years, 3 children with diabetic ketoacidosis at their diagnosis. And indeed, research has shown where we should go, because we have a better and better understanding of type 1 diabetes. Next slide. We know now that, can I have the next slide? We know now that type 1 diabetes is an autoimmune disease with a genetic basis. There are triggers in the environment. And we know now that this clinical stage that we as old generation doctors used to call the diagnosis of type 1, we should now say it's the diagnosis of clinical type 1. It's actually the diagnosis of stage 3 type 1 diabetes, because we know now that this autoimmune disease is there for months, even years beforehand. We are now able to diagnose this disease not on the basis of the old, like the old Egyptians actually diagnosed diabetes, namely polyuria, polydipsia, and what have you. But we're now able to diagnose this autoimmune disease by the presence of autoantibodies, and we call that now stage 1. But this is an asymptomatic stage. We have normoglycemia, and so that's where we want to go. Present to you in this meeting, this is what it's about, early detection and the unmet need of rolling this out in Europe. Next slide. That's where we want to go. And so, next slide. The way we can do this is by the detection of the presence of autoantibodies, antibodies directed against proteins and peptides present in the beta cell. And this is work from Europe, from Germany, as was already mentioned, also Finland, but also US, showing that if you have, this is now people in the general population, if you have 2 or more of these autoantibodies in your blood, the horse has left the barn. You have autoimmune type 1 diabetes, and you will, if you wait long enough, move to clinical stage 3 type 1 diabetes in nearing 100% of cases. And so this is now what it means. And Annette Ziegler, who is coordinating Identify together with me, has demonstrated in Germany, in the FRIDA project, that if you screen the general population children for presence of 2 or more autoantibodies, and you pick them up, and you educate them, and you educate the families, and you monitor them, that you can virtually eradicate the risk of diabetic ketoacidosis, as is indicated here in blue in the general population in Germany not participating in screening. In red is diabetic ketoacidosis if you participate in screening. So yes, we can. We can do it. We can identify the presence of early stage T1D by presence of autoantibodies. We can do this in the genetically high-risk individuals, namely people who genetically stand close to a person with clinical type 1 diabetes, family members, people who have other autoimmune diseases, thyroid disease, people who have other genetic predispositions, children with Down syndrome, for instance. But the challenge is really not how to set up screening in these people, because we know where they are. The challenge is how to set it up in the general population. And so many questions exist. How should we do it? Should we do it in schools? Should we do it with general pediatricians? How do we organize the testing? How do we educate these people, etc.? How do we communicate about this quite rare disease? And so all of these questions, next slide, were what we tried to, what we tried to answer with this Identify project. It sits in the context of the amazing IHI program. I'm a big fan of IHI because it makes you work together. I think you're also a big fan because it's not just us academic scientists cooking in our laboratories. It's scientists, it's clinician scientists, it's clinicians, it's people living with the disease. It's industry and everybody coming together with also foundations, Breakthrough T1D present here also, Helmsley Trust. It's amazing to see that our American friends come to Europe. Yeah. This is unique. America doesn't have IHI. They don't want to put industry together with academics and with foundations. And this is so amazing. And thank you, IHI. We have our scientific officer here. And this is unique. This is unique. Next slide, please. So what we tried to do is indeed in different countries in Europe, test how to do general population. We took very diverse countries, Czechia, Portugal, Italy, Denmark and Sweden, and then made innovative protocols, not only for screening, you can go on with the slides now, but also protocols for monitoring. We're nearly at 100,000 children screened, getting off the ground more than we had foreseen. So this is an amazing success. Countries like Czechia, to call them out, already screened 15,000, Poland already 22,000. It's quite amazing to see. Next slide. So we have an identify screening protocol, also a monitoring protocol, where we in an innovative way are using also novel technologies. Again, partner Medtronic is here giving us sensors to see if this is a novel way of monitoring people. Next slide. We also work together internationally to make a screening consensus. Next slide. The monitoring consensus. Again, getting this field off the ground. And then, very important, we also communicate to HCPs. I don't make it a secret. My generation of doctors, when you tell them we want to screen for early stage T1D, they say, well, why? Why? I mean, we can diagnose polyuria, polydipsia. Yes, but there's diabetic ketoacidosis. Yeah, put them in intensive care. We will. So it's a very difficult discussion, let me tell you. And that's why we would break into European Association of Diabetes conference, blah, blah, blah. We communicate with the healthcare professionals. We're very grateful to our partners also, Sanofi, for instance, also in IHI, doing a lot of legwork to really educate healthcare professionals. I also want to thank Novo also helping us there. And we made a general population screening campaign now called It's in Your Hands, to really make a tool for countries who want to start screening but don't know how to communicate. It will be all ready for them. So if you hear It's in Your Hands, this is what it's about. Next slide. So, and of course, we also want to engage with policymakers. That's where EUDF is helping us, because everybody needs to be ready. Those who live with the disease, to motivate everybody else, the general population, the doctors, the nurses, everybody involved, but also our policymakers, to really get it off the ground and change our healthcare systems from a rather reactive healthcare system. Oh, there's clinical type 1, I should do something. No, we want to be proactive and keep the people healthy for a longer time and eventually prevent clinical type 1. Next slide. So, yeah, we are identified, and one of our proud partners is also San Raffaele in Milan. And so it's a great pleasure to introduce Professor Emanuele Bosi, who was crucial, together with Francesca Olivi. Where is she? Voila. She is not a doctor, but she is the powerhouse behind Professor Bosi, who really got this law going in Italy. But it will be Professor Bosi who will tell us about the lessons learned. Emanuele, thank you very much.
Thank you very much for the invitation and the opportunity to show you in a few words how lucky we are in Italy and where we are now. Next slide, please. In late 2023, the Italian Parliament passed unanimously a law making screening for type 1 diabetes and celiac disease associated available for all children and adolescents. And the general objective was to make available this possibility using the national health system as part of a public health policy. Specific aims were, of course, with regard to type 1 diabetes, prevent or at least reduce the incidence of diabetic ketoacidosis at the clinical onset of the disease, and also identify people potentially susceptible to receive disease-modifying therapy. On the celiac side, we know that at least 50% of children or adolescents or even adult people living with celiac disease are undiagnosed. And screening for specific autoantibodies is the only way to identify these people. And by the identification, you can start with the prompt therapy, which is in a way a cure, consistent in the removal of gluten from diet. Next slide. Immediately after the law was passed, the Ministry of Health organized a pilot study next in a smaller scale, just to test organizational feasibility and acceptability of this law. And there were 4 regions with a sample of a little bit more than 5,000 children tested, and by applying a model which was based on the network of family pediatricians in Italy, of course, capillary blood drawing and a centralized lab. A crucial role is really played by family pediatricians. In Italy, it is quite a unique condition because we have, in addition to the classical GPs, we have GPs for children consisting in family pediatricians. And so we exploited this network as a possible tool to reach all the people in the nation. And this pilot study was concluded and was working very well. Family pediatricians worked really in a fantastic way. They were responsible for contacting the family, convincing them, administering the informed consent, do the blood sample, and then ship the sample to the lab. Next, please. These are just the results of this. These are still unpublished. And on the diabetes side, next, well, what we found was expected. We found more or less 0.2% in comparison with 0.3% of other countries. The number of people screened, of children screened, having 2 or more autoantibodies, meaning that they were really in the early phase of the disease. Some surprise, next slide please, came next with regard to celiac. We found much more than expected. The number of children having positivity, having autoantibodies specific for celiac disease, they were about 2.8%. We were expecting something around 1.5. We don't know exactly what does it mean. We know that in other countries, in Scandinavia and also in US, they are getting the same results. So much more celiac disease than expected. Next. So where we are now? Certainly, the approval of the national law, Italy was the first country. We didn't expect to become so popular, but this was what really happened. It was our idea that screening together type 1 diabetes and celiac disease was strengthening the possibility of screening because, you know, there is a large awareness about celiac disease in the general population, while surprisingly, type 1 diabetes is not so known as a disease. So the fact of screening the two together is helping to convince family to accept the screening. The pilot test was performing well. The results I just show you. What is pending? Now, the law was passed, the pilot study was done, the model was identified. So the current step is a political and administrative step, because in Italy, the national health system is divided by regions. Each region has the responsibility, and the passage of responsibility from the ministry central to peripheral regions. It's not so easy, and there is, the drawing of the decree is still going on since a number of months. We are optimistic, however, this is our current political issue. Thank you very much, and thanks again for inviting me.
Thank you, Emanuele. And I'm a horrible chair, as you see. First of all, I thank you, MEP Stine Bosse, for reminding me there's food. So again, those of you who want some food, please get up and get some food. Second, we're going over time horribly. So Jürgen, I'm going to give you 17 minutes.
17 instead of 25. Okay. But thank you, first of all, MEP Stine Bosse. Thank you, all the other MEPs, for having us identify here at the European Parliament. Thank you also to co-organizer European Diabetes Forum, Bart Kasia, for having us. So I'm Jürgen Verkouteren. I'm one of the program managers of Identify, and I live with type 1 diabetes myself for 10 years now. So I think I know the daily burden the disease brings, and I don't want to put that upon my 3 children. And that's also, of course, the reason that I have them screened. But before starting to work here at Identify, I actually didn't know that there was a quite easy way to get to know that my children would have or will develop type 1 diabetes or will not develop type 1 diabetes. For me, that was like an eye-opener. And of course, then I was screening my children. And if I will be having the possibility to have them rescreened in a few years and they will still be negative, I will be quite reassured. So for me, screening and early detection is about being prepared as a parent, and also not being afraid of it, and being and to learn about it. I think it's very important. Now today I'm quite honored to moderate this panel of 6 other people all living with type 1 diabetes, and I'm actually quite surprised that I didn't hear any beeps or alarms going off from this side of the table, because we're all people living with type 1 diabetes here. And I think, well, yes, you turned it off, that's probably the reason. But I think we know best what it's like to live with the disease, and also to answer the title, or the question that was in the title of the event today, about addressing unmet needs for T1D. I'm going to start by asking the person to my right, who is a member of the European Parliament for Denmark, Niels Hansen, already introduced by Chantal Mathieu, about, Niels, what do you think were the biggest challenges when you were faced with type 1 diagnosis in the past in managing your disease while you were fulfilling a professional life and also being here at the European Parliament? I think also CGM played a big role there.
Yeah, I think the first one was to get to know my new best friend here. Okay. And second of all, learning to live with the disease without feeling like a handicap. Mm-hmm. That was really difficult, especially when I joined politics, because there you have a life where you go in and out of meetings all the time, and you had to poke yourself in the finger every time you go into a meeting where there's always food. So that was a huge problem. And it was a huge problem for me because this was definitely not a part of my DNA that I wanted, that I was a sick person or a person with diabetes. I got it when I was 37, living a great life. And I think the reason I got it was that I was a very bit overweight. I always had this elevated weight, and I weighed about 120 kilo. And my wife decided that now you need to go on a diet. And every clever man in this room knows that you do what your wife tells you. So I did, and I lost 20 kilos, and I was pretty happy. And then after 3 or 4 months or something like that, then I started to lose weight like hell. And I had a job at the time where I was self-employed, so I traveled a lot around the country, and every time there was a gas station, I tried to eat something sugar, and I didn't gain any weight. And eventually I went to the doctor, and he told me that, Mr. Hansen, you have diabetes. For me, it would have changed a lot if there was this early detection program, if there was somebody who earlier in my life had an adult conversation with me. That would have been good. Becoming a politician, then you all know what that life is like, and I refuse to be a victim of the disease. I will not do that. And remember one night in the Danish Parliament, it was very, very late. We had been in the room till 11 o'clock or something like that. I had to drive home, and I didn't check my blood sugar. And I do not remember how I got home. But the next morning, I was hospitalized. Sorry. Sorry about that. With a ketoacidosis. I had a blood sugar of 70.
Maybe we can come back to you a bit later.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, Niels, for this very personal testimonial. Now, to my left here, I've got also a great couple of people. I've got Maria Tornes here. Maria is also from Denmark. We're surrounded by Danish people, I think. Maria also has type 1 herself. She's also mother of this great daughter here beside me, Katrine. Maria is also a clinical study nurse herself. Now, Maria, can I ask you to share the story of how Katrine was actually diagnosed with type 1 diabetes?
Yeah. When we had Catherine, we had an agreement at home that I should never measure her blood sugar without discussing it with my husband. He should take the decision because otherwise I could measure it all the time. But we have been to Copenhagen and seeing my husband run the half marathon. And when we were in there, it was raining a lot, and we had the rain suits on, and it was just warm and wet and not very nice. So when we got to the car, she emptied a bottle of water for half a liter, and I said, it's okay because we've been in the rain suit, so she's dehydrated, she needs something to drink. I'm thirsty myself, and you also are thirsty, so don't make a mess about that. And then we went home, and we sat in the sofa having tea and something to eat, and she had a bottle of water pouring to a glass, and she only poured a little bit of water into the glass, and doing it many, many times. But to me, she was playing, she was learning how to pour water into the glass. Some hours later, we were having dinner, and she said, can I go to the toilet? And we said, yes, of course you can. And she peed a big portion. And then during the dinner, she said, can I go to the toilet again? And again, she was peeing a lot. And then afterwards, when we were done, she said, I really need to go to the toilet. And then my husband said, I think you should measure her blood sugar. And I was like, no, because, she's just been dehydrated. So now she needs to get some of the water out again. It's normal. And he said, then prove me I'm wrong. And that I really like to do. So I measured her blood sugar, and I measured her blood sugar in her toe because then she didn't have any sticky thing on her fingers. And I measured a blood sugar in Danish number 25.8, and that is really high. And then I called the doctors, and they said, yeah, well, let's see her. And we got into the emergency, and they said, you know, her biochemistry is quite clean. It's only high blood sugar. We're not sure it's diabetes. But me working as a diabetes nurse for more than 20 years now, I was like, what kind of disease could it be? Could you please tell me that? Because then it would be okay. And she said, well, it's just diabetes. Don't worry. And that comes from a person that doesn't know the burden of living with diabetes. In our house, we have the say that it's the term of our life to live with diabetes, and we have a good life, and we do whatever we want almost. But when you don't know the burden of what you have to do to have a good day, to have a good life with diabetes, then don't say like anything like that. Yeah.
So it's quite surprising to hear your story, to see that even you, as living with disease, felt it so hard to maybe even to see it, to accept it, even when it was so close to you.
Yeah. I remember when I was pregnant with her, I have always been working within diabetes. So all my colleagues are diabetes doctors and diabetes nurses. And everyone said to me, it's a very, very low risk, 2 to 3%. So no, don't worry, you will not have a child with diabetes. But when Katrina was very small, she looks a lot like me. And I have many times been thinking about maybe what if she would have type 1 diabetes? And every time people around it would say, the risk is so low. The risk is so low. So yeah, it's something that you fear when you are a woman living with type 1, if your child would have type 1 diabetes.
Mm-hmm. Can I ask you, which kind of words of encouragement would you give to parents who just have had a diagnosis of one of their children diagnosed with T1D? You as an experienced mother.
You have to go through a lot before it becomes good, but take it easy, it will be good. But also we come from Denmark and we have a good healthcare system, so it is good. We have good access to diabetes technologies, and we have good insulin, so it will be good. But it takes a lot of time. I have used much time both in the kindergarten and in the schools and in the sports clubs to prepare the people that are around my daughter to be able to take care of her when I'm not there. And also for my in-laws and my parents when they wanted to take care of her, and also her friends' parents. And it takes a lot of time to put people into what is diabetes, because many people know about type 2 diabetes and they say, so we should just not give her any carbs.
Yeah.
That she should have.
Okay, thank you, Maria. So, Katrina, I think you're now 13, eh? Am I correct? 13, or 14 almost?
Oh, 13.
13. Well, do you still remember something about your diagnosis when you first was diagnosed with T1D? You still remember something?
Not really. How old
are you?
I was 3 years old, so I don't remember it.
No, you don't have that many memories. Now, your mother tells me, and also you, we had a conversation before, you're a very sportive type. You do triathlon, she does handball. I can imagine living with T1D in combination with doing lots of sports is quite challenging. Can you say something about it?
Yeah, like always before training, I need to eat something with carbs, so a bread or banana or something. And then, sometimes when I do training, before training, I take too much insulin, and then I got too low blood sugar, and then I can't be with other girls on the cart, and then I need to sit out and drink a juice or something. And I always need to bring a kit with a juice or some sweets. Yeah. Yeah.
And how is it at school? Do you also recognize what your mother is saying, that a lot of people around you maybe don't understand it?
Yeah, it's a little difficult. Sometimes they ask, what's wrong? And then, oh, my blood sugar is just low, but they don't understand what it is. Okay. So, yeah.
Thank you, Katrina. Do you want to say something else to this audience of people?
I also, sometimes I forgot to mute the pump, and then it makes a lot of, a loud alarm. And I really hate it because then anyone can hear it, and Catherine pumps is beeping and what is wrong, and So, I really hate that.
Yeah. Yeah, technology is great, but sometimes... Yeah. I think technology is great, but sometimes you want to throw away these things as far as you can with all these alarms. Okay, thank you very much, Katrine, for your testimonial. To my right, no, again, yes, to my right, I've got Michaela Mervartova. Michaela, you're from the Czech Republic. You were diagnosed also age 13, and I remember you had a very, let's say, not a smooth landing into type 1 diabetes. That's maybe even a big understatement. Can you tell us a bit more about it?
Yeah, sure. So my diagnosis went really smoothly because we just went to the doctor because I was thirsty and tired and all the time. And I spent like 2 weeks in a hospital. I left the hospital. I was like excited and motivated because I knew everything. I studied everything. I thought I will handle everything. And then in the next few months, we found out that it's not true, of course, because the reality in the real life, it's completely different than what you hear in a hospital. I ended up in the coma for 7 days because I had so bad ketoacidosis that I was fighting for my life. They were just waiting for my heart to stop. So I was transported by helicopter to the biggest hospital in Czech Republic, and after 7 days, I woke up. I was very, very lucky to survive this situation because it was very serious. My family cannot talk about it till this day. Like I can talk about it normally because I don't remember any of it. But my family, my parents, they are traumatized, I think, for life. And the reason why I ended up in this situation is pretty simple. We were not prepared. We were not prepared, not just that we were lost in doses of insulin and carbs and in blood sugars, but we weren't mentally prepared for this. If I would have been screened, we would have this precious, valuable time to process it, to have the first shock that I will be sick probably for the rest of my life, and this like downfall while I was still healthy. And that's a huge privilege because you can see how I end up like this, because we didn't have this time. We didn't have time to process, to prepare for the diagnosis. Yes.
Thank you, Michaela. And maybe something else. What is the thing that you wish people would understood better about type 1 diabetes? Isn't mental health also something that you think it's quite important to talk about?
Yes. I would love to point that out because every time when there is when there are talks about diabetes, it's mostly about the physical health, of course, but mental health is usually forgotten. And it's very important because, as we all know, the mental health can affect your blood sugars, blood sugar levels. So it's also very important to know how heavy diabetes can be on your mental health. And there should be, I think, more attention to it. So, yeah, I would like that people to know. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Michaela. Now, maybe going back quickly to Niels here. Niels, in your experience as being a member of the European Parliament, how do you see the collaboration with other policymakers to maybe promote this new way of detecting type 1 diabetes in an early stage?
I think it's very important to do that, but I also think it's a disease that everybody knows about, but very few people knows how it is to live with it, and therefore I'm also here today because I think it's very important that we try to communicate this on this level. I will never go out in an election campaign and communicate about it because I do not want votes because I'm sick. But I love to communicate about it here because I think it's so important that people really understand what it's like and how the traumatization of it is, and therefore I think early detection can do something for the people who gets the disease, but also for the society, because the more we know on an earlier stage, the longer we have the people, and that's why this is important as well. So it's not just a personal issue for me; it's also a society issue that I think is very important.
And you touch upon already a few times the fact that it's quite difficult, I think, for us living with the disease to be on the one side, we don't want to be the victim, we don't want to be called sick, but on the other hand, we want to also show it's still a difficult disease to cope with, and it's worth getting this out in the air. Okay.
Yeah, I think, and for me, honesty is probably the best way of going with it. So I tell people, I have it in my office. They all know that if there's 3 beeps, take your insulin. If there's 5 beeps, they bring me a Coke, and and that works. So being honest about it is very, very important. And I think that also we need to make some discussion on a European level as well on the whole sensor thing, because I have to admit, the life I have after my ketoacidosis and after getting the sensor is so much better. I do never feel like a handicap anymore, and I really feel I can live the life that I want to feel. Plus the fact that my wife is safe, because if my blood sugar gets too low during the night when I'm sleeping, this thing will wake me up, and I can do something about it. And on the other hand, if it's too high, again, and when you live a life where you're much separated, this is also a thing that makes my wife, my children, and probably your parents as well, makes people a lot more secure in us being people who want to live our life the way we want to do it.
Thank you, Niels. Going to my right, to the powerhouse, Francesca Ruvi. Francesca, I know you as a great advocate also for the Fondazione Italiana Diabete. You were indeed, as Chantal was saying, a big believer in the law of Italy. But going to your personal story as living with type 1 diabetes, what has been the hardest part since you were diagnosed? What has changed the most for you?
Yeah, I was diagnosed when I was 40, so 15 years ago. And what I miss the most is to have the whole brain doing the brain, because I have a part of my brain that is doing the pancreas. This is something that I try to make people understand. It's been calculated that we do at least 180 decisions per day, more than a person that do not have type 1 diabetes. And those decisions are on a drug that eventually can kill us or can bring us to the emergency. So you have a part of your brain, sometimes it's very little, sometimes it's half, sometimes it's all the brain that is doing the pancreas. And what does it mean to do the pancreas? When I have to make people understand that, I say to them, it's like saying your earth, when and how much it has to bump, it has to push. No? Because you are not saying to the heart, you are saying to the pancreas. It's very difficult to explain the pancreas and all the insulin things. So I say, it's like thinking that now you need to walk. So you walk fast, so your heart needs to pump more blood, and you have to say him. And then you have to say him, stop, I don't need so much blood. So this is a way, I think, to make people understand what it is in a very simple way. So this is the thing that I miss the most. I would like all my brain doing the brain and not the pancreas.
Okay. Thank you, Francesca. I just got some angry eyes from Chantal Mathieu. I need to speed up a bit. So I'm going to my last person to my left. There I have Kirsten Jorsal, also from Denmark. Kirsten works for Novo Nordisk, so represent the pharmaceutical industry here. Now, from your perspective of working in that company, and also as someone living with the disease, what do you think companies should do better?
Yeah, in definitely the companies we can produce. We can make the insulin, but the understanding of living with type 1 diabetes as a worker is something that the industry can do a lot better. I think the common knowledge in biotech and in pharmaceutical is that it's easy as long as you can take the insulin. But the story behind it is that it is not easy. Your stories touched me a lot because I was also diagnosed late in my age, I think, because I had a kid. He was 3 years old. I was in my late 20s, and when I was working, I should know all the symptoms, but I didn't recognize them. I was running in and out of a meeting, and it was actually my project manager who said to me, I think you need to take your blood soon, because now you have been entered the room 3 times and have taken 3 of those. No. But I didn't recognize it myself. So when I work with it daily, I work in a place where we produce the construction sites, we design the machines, so I'm not close to the therapeutical part of it, but I still have a foot inside. But my common knowledge is, it's a very big company that I work in, and I'm actually in a company where we work with 2 different things, the obesity part and the insulin part and the diabetic part, but we are still struggling. And the therapeutical part is that I come to work, my day starts every morning, and sometimes I think I want to have a break. My brain needs a break. And that's difficult to understand in the pharmaceutical industry. Even though we can produce it, to understand me as a person that I need a break, you have to remember I go into controlled areas, clean rooms with mask and everything, and I have alarms on all the time, and I cannot just go out. I cannot take any food in with me. It's not allowed. So I'm in a stage where it can be difficult. So they can do all the science, and we are doing it. We are very good at making the therapeutical part. We have very good discussions with all biotech companies about very good needles to look into how is it if you're not on a pump, but you are with the pen, but understand people that are, as I call it, because I don't want to be the sick person either, the customer, please, we can do a lot better. And it's always try to understand and talk to us, because sometimes when we are developing something in the biotech, it's not what we actually need.
We'll send them a note.
Good.
Okay, thank you, Kirsten, for this call to action. So, and this ends our panel. I'll give the word back to Chantal Mathieu.
Thank you, Jürgen. And thank you to this amazing panel for being so open. You know, every time I listen to people with type 1, I hear different aspects. So thank you so much for motivating us to end this disease. And I said it before, the end will go through research. So now we move to different speakers who will illustrate what is happening in Europe and how we can stand together stronger. I do realize that people have agendas and will need to leave at 2, but the good news is that the next meeting in this room is cancelled. So those of us who can stay can, you know, just go a little bit over time. But again, we respect everybody who will have to leave. But so I now ask Finn Christensen, the Program Director of Dia Union, again a partner of Identify, to talk about the Scandinavian perspective. And again, there's food, dear friends. Help yourself.
Thank you. Thank you, Chantal. Thank you for having us here. To the organizers, my name is Finn Christensen. I'm the Program Director of Dia Union. I'm not a medical professional, but I do have a son who have lived 27 of his 28 years with type 1 diabetes. Next slide. So I'd like to talk about a little bit about what type 1 diabetes looks like in Sweden and Denmark. Almost 110 persons are affected. Of these, almost 11,000 are children and teenagers that have to treat themselves with insulin, monitor and adjust their blood sugar all day, all night, all year, 24/7 for the rest of their lives. And in spite of what we've heard, which is true that we have better treatments, still we are seeing that 70% in our two nations that have excellent health systems are not reaching their treatment goals. So we need to do something. And the cost to these two societies, Denmark and Sweden, is approximately 1.7 billion euros. Next slide. So a small group consisting of researchers and myself approached the Novo Nordisk Foundation back in 2018 to ask for support for an initiative to establish a research collaboration between Steno Diabetes Center in Denmark and Lund University in Sweden. It was funded by the Novo Nordisk Foundation, and we also received additional funding from the EU by the local EU Interreg program. Also got support from the region Skåne in Sweden and the capital region of Denmark. And the project became based in the network and project driving organization Medicon Valley Alliance. In the first phase, we concentrated broadly on type 1 diabetes research, but in the second phase, we scoped in clearly on early detection as a pathway for bringing on new therapies. And at that time, that was also when we became part of the Identify application. In the current phase of the program, which started in 2024, we were, one slide back, we extended our goal to also include establishing national early detection programs in our two countries, and Sanofi came on board as an industrial and financial partner. Just a couple of weeks ago, we received the happy news that the Novo Nordisk Foundation has granted funds to expand early detection, not only to include Steno Diabetes Center Copenhagen, but all Steno centers in Denmark. And going forward, we're looking into expanding our collaboration also to other Nordic countries. Next slide, please. The reason we're doing that is because the Nordic countries have a lot of similarities, for instance, the health systems, and also each country on its own is fairly small, but together we kind of reach a critical mass. So we have a lot of things we can collaborate around. Next slide. Let's talk about how we do the actual early detection in the Union. We do it in two different ways. In Sweden, we look at, we invite people from the general population to participate. And in Denmark, we are looking at the first-degree relatives to persons with type 1 diabetes. Once we receive informed consent, we provide participants with test kits so they can take a small blood sample by themselves at home. All these samples end up in our lab in Sweden, where they are analyzed for autoantibodies, as we heard Chantal talk about. They are a biomarker for risk of type 1 diabetes. And if the test is positive, a confirmatory test is taken. And if that is positive as well, persons will be offered to be monitored and followed through annual or biannual tests. If the disease progresses, you may be offered to participate in clinical trials, clinical studies of new medicines that can further delay the onset of the disease. Next slide. So far, what we've seen in Denmark, where we're looking at the general population, where we're looking at the first-degree relatives to persons with type 1 diabetes, we have found, I cannot see the number, I don't recall it in my head, I think it's 1,410. In the first phase, where we're only looking at siblings, we found 1,410. Out of these, 110 were positive for an increased risk of type 1 diabetes. In the current phase of the program, so far we have tested 657 persons, of which 37 has tested positive. In Sweden, where we are looking at the general population, we have tested almost 6,000 persons, and 92% have been tested positive. And I'm also very happy to announce that we have already included persons from both Denmark and Sweden in clinical trials of new medicines that can delay the onset of the disease. Next slide. I think we're going to talk about, let's see, can we have the next slide? Other autoimmune diseases. And we're talking about that for several reasons. One is that the methods that we're using to analyze in DiaUnion allows for test of 2 additional diseases at basically the same cost and in the same process. So therefore, we have decided to look at 2 diseases, celiac disease and autoimmune thyroid disease that carry the same underlying risk genes. We hope by doing that we can see that this will increase the societal value of the project and also give us broader learnings about autoimmunity. Next slide. Obviously, we're also interested in learning what the families think about early detection of type 1 diabetes. The families with type 1 diabetes. This is, of course, in Denmark, where we're testing first-degree relatives. So we did do a survey among the members of the Danish Diabetes Foundation and the think tank of type 1 diabetes, and we found that there was a very high interest in early detection among the families, but also some concerns because we know that this can bring some reassurance about where is our risk in the family to bring on this disease, but also some worry about the answer, or if it is a positive answer, how do we handle this really? So therefore, we know that careful follow-up and information is extremely important. And not surprisingly, the interest of participating in an early detection program increases dramatically if something would be available for people to delay the onset of the disease. Next slide. So, as I said, the goal is to establish national early detection programs in Denmark and Sweden. And on a European level, we do that, of course, in collaboration with Identify. And in the 2 countries, we have formed advocacy alliances to bring forward this agenda, consisting of patient organizations, clinics, regions, life science organizations, and industry. And this is how we work to pave the way for early detection and prevention of type 1 diabetes. Thank you.
Thank you, Finn. And now we go to Dr. Petra Gooyens, the Deputy Head of Combating Diseases Unit at DGRTT.
Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Today we gather here to address a very, let's say, urgent health issue that affects millions of people in Europe and across the globe, type 1 diabetes. This autoimmune disease requires lifelong management, imposes a considerable burden on individuals, their families, but also on healthcare systems. It demands strict monitoring, effective disease management, and appropriate medical care to ensure optimal health, reduce, let's say, minimize associated health risks, but also to prevent complications. And I want to thank you, panel, for your very, very honest testimonial. Research on non-communicable diseases, including diabetes, has been really at the forefront and a long-standing priority of the European Commission through its framework program, Horizon Europe and Horizon 2020. Under Horizon 2020, over 250 million euro was allocated to type 1 diabetes funding. Horizon Europe has continued this commitment, already earmarking close to 170 million, with expectations to grow further in the coming 3 years. Many of these projects have benefited from public-private partnerships, such as the Innovative Medicines Initiative and Innovative Health Initiative. These collaborations unite the European Union with life science industries, fostering groundbreaking work in diabetes research. The next speaker, Delia Sapia, my colleague, will surely elaborate on these initiatives. Now, as we strive to position Europe as a global leader in both health and competitiveness, our investments in health and life science research must be robust and forward-thinking. The Commission's adoption of the European Life Science Strategy aims to make Europe the most attractive place for life science research by 2030. This vision features the flagship clinical research investment plan that will support multi-country clinical trials, building on European research infrastructure. Clinical research is crucial for early disease detections, but also disease interception, developing innovative therapies, and bringing new medical solutions to the market efficiently and effectively. By strengthening the EU's clinical research ecosystem, we aim to accelerate the translation of scientific discoveries into real-world applications. And by doing so, we can improve health outcomes, but also sustain healthcare systems. Now, as the healthcare landscape continues to evolve, there is a strong need for the EU to reinforce its clinical research ecosystem and advance towards a real single market.
Yes, please.
Voila. For this, we think there are three key elements that are needed to create this true single market for clinical research. One is a supportive, innovation-friendly regulatory framework, funding for multi-country clinical research networks, but also funding for multi-country clinical trials. The European Union remains committed to foster a thriving environment for research and innovation through the Horizon Europe program. We are dedicated to ensuring that innovative research supports Europe's long-term prosperity, competitiveness, and well-being. Now, looking beyond 2027, we have adopted a proposal for the next Horizon Europe program as part of the forthcoming multi-annual framework program. It is a proposal for a robust, self-standing program aligned with our union's priority to strengthen Europe's competitiveness, featuring a proposed 175 billion budget, nearly doubling the current funding. It will work in synergy with the new European Competitiveness Fund. This will elevate European research and innovation funding, supporting the full innovation journey from research to deployment. We hope for timely progress in negotiations with Member States and European Parliament, so that we can advance our goal of making Europe a strong world-leading hub for life sciences by 2030. Now, ladies and gentlemen, driving competitiveness through health research intertwines not only societal, but also socioeconomic benefits. Improved health outcomes for people with type 1 diabetes translates into a more vibrant workforce, reduced healthcare costs, and most of all, for enhanced quality of life and well-being for people diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. This positive cycle will reinforce Europe's leadership in scientific advancements and socioeconomic resilience. Thank you for your attention, and thank you very much for having invited me.
Unfortunately, I have to go sharp, 5 to 2, so this will not be closing remarks, but it will be my second remark. First of all, I just again want to thank you all for being here, and especially for your very, very touching testimonials. It just makes everything more real that we talk to the people considered and not just about the people considered. We could learn a lot in many dimensions from exactly this. I want to also champion the fact that from many of you was also mentioned the fact that we are looking also in many other areas of autoimmune illnesses that we should consider. And we should also research more in those areas. I have grandchildren who suffer from that, and I have close relatives who suffer from diabetes 1. So I know that they are connected. We just don't know enough about it yet, but we should do. I do think that the atmosphere in a room like this, as it is often when we collect people with knowledge, with shared experiences and political will, we do get to a different level, and we can do much more together. We should. And I also want to thank you for taking in the picture of mental health. It should be something that we talked about without any, not shying away from it. And mental health is something that we're all dealing with. I mean, we all, in some way, we exist. So it shouldn't be something we just put under the carpet. So thank you very much for that. And then just let me promise you that where I work, and it is the Scent Committee that I'm running off to participate in the healthcare committee, the health committee, I will try and do everything I can. In the CMA, it was also mentioned, and I want to also champion the fact that we do have a commission who are very committed in this area. I've spoken to you several times and met the commissioner many times, and I do really think that we should cherish that fact. We will also look into this in the Biotech Act. There is a lot to be done there, especially regarding cross-border trials. If we don't get it done this time round, then we will have to get it done in the Biotech Act. We don't need more buses. I mean, sorry, omnibuses are fine, but we don't need omnibuses where we're actually sitting with pieces of legislation where we can make a difference. And then just one very important thing, it might also be to some of the fellow MEPs, Parliament colleagues here in the room. Please, let's get health into the MFF. It's not something that we can deal with country by country. Not in the times we're in. We can do, and this is quoting the Commissioner for Budget, we can do so much more better and cheaper together. And this we must. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and again, thank you for hosting us here too. But I will now give the word to Clelia Salpea, who is scientific officer at IHI, also our scientific officer, used to be of EUDF and now of Identify. So Clelia, the IHI model.
Thank you very much, Chantal. So IHI is part of Europe's response to health challenges, like Petra just mentioned. What I would like to do is to explain why it is important to have public-private partnerships in Europe and how that contributes to the ecosystem, and how public-private partnerships have contributed to type 1 diabetes research, helping to place Europe at its forefront. So the health challenges that we're facing in type 1 diabetes are complex and global, and as both mentioned, they cannot be tackled by a single organization or a single country. The people living with diabetes, the industry, the regulators, the companies, the industry, and the clinicians, they all hold a piece of the puzzle. And what we are trying to do at IHI is to bring all these actors to work together, break silos that may exist between them, leverage their complementary expertise, pull together different kinds of resources. And this way, we can bridge the gap that exists between new knowledge, innovation, and implementation of actual solutions in healthcare. Our projects in type 1 diabetes are a living proof of this concept. So we have projects that include leading researchers and clinical centers, different companies from different sectors of the industry, the people living with type 1 diabetes represented by organizations like the Breakthrough Type 1D, with whom we have a long-lasting relationship. And this teaming up helps us to identify what are the unmet needs of patients and launch projects that tackle these unmet needs. So with type 1 diabetes being so far a condition that people live with, the needs of the patients were to manage the complications of the disease. So we have projects that try to improve the management of hypoglycemia and see how that affects the quality of life. Projects that try to improve the management of diabetic kidney disease or the risk for developing cardiovascular disease. But then the community drove us to address the need for clinical trials for disease-modifying therapies, therapies that stop the progression of the disease. And this is how the EUDF and EUDF Harvest projects that were led by Chantal were born. This public-private partnership that was built under the EUDF actually managed, I could say, to transform the ecosystem of type 1 diabetes. They built a pan-European clinical network in 23 European countries for clinical trials of disease-modifying therapies, and they conducted 4 clinical trials in these projects. They were pioneers in involving the people with type 1 diabetes in the design of the clinical trials. And they also established protocols for innovative trials designs. Recently, the results of one of the studies were announced and showed that the drug tested was positive, could stop the progression of type 1 diabetes. And what is important is that they managed to achieve that in less time than would have been with a classical clinical trial. So now, having built with the type 1 diabetes community this infrastructure, this capacity to test disease-modifying therapies, the next need was what the Identify came to address, to detect the people with the early stages of disease, because they are the ones that could benefit the most from these therapies. So the Identify project was born, and the partnership, to a large extent, was based to the long-lasting partnership under the EUDF. Of course, there were more partners added, but the initial core was coming from the EUDF. What is interesting in Identify is that it includes also companies from different sectors of industry, so not only pharma companies, but also medtech companies. And another important aspect for me is that the Identify consortium included and engaged with regional actors and authorities. And I think this is very important because as we move from disease management to prevention in primary care, we need the regional actors and authorities to ensure that the strategy developed is implementable in healthcare systems. So these projects, the EUDF and Identify, they are contributing to a big front that is combating type 1 diabetes. But there is another unmet need and this is of people that have already fully developed type 1 diabetes, and they are numerous around Europe. So what their unmet need is to find therapies that can restore their insulin's independence. And these therapies are cell therapies based on renewable cell sources. And actually, this is one of the topics at our current call of proposals at IHI. And with this topic, we hope to put together a partnership that can address the challenges of cell therapies and realize their full potential for type 1 diabetes. So at IHI, we believe that we need to continue supporting research in these different fronts so that all European citizens have access to early detection, but also to therapies for different stages of the disease. And to achieve this, Europe needs strong enabling platforms like the Innovative Health Initiative that can bring the different actors that are needed around the same table to work together, form coalitions that can turn health and innovation into real benefit of patients, and at the same time keep Europe global competitive. Thank you for your attention.
So you need to leave. You will miss the most, no, not the most exciting, but a very exciting part, because now we will be discussing disease-modifying therapies, but we will tape it for you.
Thank you.
And we will send you the link.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Big job.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So now we go on with discussing disease-modifying therapies and where this is going and how partnerships between foundations like Breakthrough T1D, clinical researchers and industry will make a difference for people living with type 1 diabetes in early stages or in clinical stages. And to start off our discussion, we will have a little panel too, but to start off our discussion, I ask Carmen Hurtado del Pozo from Breakthrough T1D, she is Director of European Research, to briefly introduce the work we did in the European Diabetes Forum on disease-modifying therapies in type 1 diabetes. Carmen.
Thank you, Chantal. Next slide. So, what are disease-modifying therapies? We have been talking about from the very early session. At EMA define disease-modifying therapy as any treatment that changes the progress of a long-term disease. But what that means for type 1 diabetes is that at the stage 4, when clinically you need insulin, and next, please. Sorry, I have some animation. People living with type 1 diabetes currently only have insulin. There is not other treatment, and this is just a survival treatment. Disease-modifying therapy means that it can delay, stop,
or even cure type 1 diabetes. Next slide. So in Europe, we have two options: wait or act now. What that means to wait? Wait means that we might fall into the risk of being behind access, innovation, and public health outcomes. But if we act now, we can prepare for the integration into the healthcare system of disease-modifying therapies. In November 2022, the first disease-modifying therapy for type 1 diabetes was approved in the United States. In 2025, March, only 500 people in the United States have been treated, which means that we have time here. We can really learn the lesson. And that's why EUDF is really working through how to prepare the healthcare system and how to really leverage the policy momentum that we are living now. In the last 3 years has been really a rising of the EU policy agenda in diabetes. It started in November 2022, led by EUDF Europe, the European Parliament resolution on diabetes, until now, the EU cardiovascular health plan that is going to be discussed and hopefully implemented, including diabetes into the agenda. Our recommendation aim to support policymakers, healthcare professionals, of course, people living with type 1 diabetes, and stakeholders across the health ecosystem. Next slide. The key recommendations are focused. First, prepare the healthcare system and professionals to deliver DNTs for type 1 diabetes, introduce early detection of type 1 diabetes, and strengthen research and ensure efficient regulatory pathways to support the development, evaluation, and approval of disease-modifying therapies for type 1 diabetes. How we can prepare healthcare system? One of the first priorities should be the healthcare capacity. We need to facilitate to conduct type 1 diabetes screening and really deliver disease-modifying therapies, set up infusion sites, and care coordination pathways. Disease-modifying therapies really are knocking the door of the EU, and we need to really be ready. We need also to incorporate protocols into national diabetes registries, aligned with EMA labeling and best practice. And one key aspect that Professor Chantal Mathieu actually emphasized early on, we need to train healthcare professionals. There is not only insulin. There are going to be more treatments, and it's in their hands to offer to the people living with type 1 diabetes. So we need to be prepared, and we really need to offer this training to the healthcare professionals and staff to really safely administer disease-modifying therapies. And lastly, we need centers of excellence, establish reference sites for disease-modifying therapy administration, and promote high quality and uniform care. Collaboration is going to be key between health ministers and patient advocacy groups, and of course address regional disparities to really ensure equitable access. I cannot think of a better example than Innodia. We have been mentioning over the session today. Innodia is a network that identified and support clinical sites. We need clinical trials, and for that, we also need early detection to offer the people at early stage living with type 1 diabetes to be part of clinical trials. Innodia is going to help Europe to be more competitive. We need to, again, get back these numbers of clinical trials, and type 1 diabetes can be one example for other diseases. And in Innodia, the network, it should be one of the flagship of type 1 diabetes in Europe. Introduce early detection of type 1 diabetes. We need to think about patients and family engagement. We need to incorporate patient perspective. If we put the people living with type 1 diabetes into the center where we do, as you can see, we can really achieve amazing things. An example in Innodia, one of the, actually, and that correct me if I'm wrong, Clelia, but one of the few IHI-IMI projects that really achieve sustainability. after the European funding finishes. So we need to really put people in the center. We need a standardization also to include clear standards for early detection and intervention, determining who should be targeted and how often and how. And it has to be part of the healthcare pathway. As well as in oncology, when we see that clinical trials is part of the clinical care pathway, we could also offer this for the early detection of stage 1 of stage 2 living with type 1 diabetes. We have really good screening practice, and it has been mentioned over the session, Identify, FRIDA, and of course, the pioneering population-wide type 1 diabetes screening in Italy. And we need to boost research and innovation. If we have disease-modifying therapies, or almost about to have, is because of research, is because of the funding. We need to increase funding to fill knowledge gaps that Chantal mentioned previously. We need to support clinical trial networks as in NODIA, and we need to strengthen evidence on long-term effects of immunotherapies. All of this we need to do in collaboration. We have to promote cross-border data sharing and patient registries. We need to accelerate access and regulatory progress. We need this unique market of the European Union. We need to do faster, and we need to have better regulatory pathway for faster disease-modifying review and development. And finally, we need to ensure access and real-world impact, capture full value of disease-modifying therapy, guarantee national recognition and access after EMA approval. With all of that, I invite you to really scan the QR code if you really want to read with the extraordinary disease-modifying therapy recommendations that EUDF worked in the last year. Thank you.
Thank you, Carmen. And indeed, this document can be downloaded also from the website of the European Diabetes Forum. I want to immediately move on to the discussion with three representatives from industry, Dr. Gusukuma from Sanofi, Maddie Farnsworth from Novo Nordisk, and Miriam Rosillo from Eli Lilly. When I think of industry and I think of the market size of type 2 diabetes and type 1 diabetes, a question comes to mind. Why do you bother with type 1 diabetes? What brings the fire in industry to really go for type 1 diabetes? So where is Luciana? Where are you? Where are you? You're there, you're just in front of me. So Luciana, Sanofi has now really been the trailblazer with the teplizumab approved in FDA, and 3 years later, we hope to have approval in Europe. But so what is the fire? Why?
Thank you. Thank you very much, Chantal. Thank you, EUDF, and thank you, Identify, for the invitation for this important conversation today. I'm Luciana Gusukuma, Sanofi employee and part of the medical affairs responsible for type 1 diabetes. And I think you raised a very important question, why industries should invest on it. And I think that brings us to a very important discussion that is, in the case of diabetes, Sanofi is in this journey, not only Sanofi, but other industries as well. We have been together in this journey for more than a century today. So it's not only diabetes as a role and diabetes type 2. Specifically, when we talk about diabetes type 1, autoimmune type 1 diabetes, Sanofi is highly invested on building capabilities in the immunological field and making sure that we address medical needs and meet medical needs so far. So that is what brings the strong investment on supporting areas in which we have gaps. And of course, Sanofi is very proud, like what was said before, life science is the background of this. Without disease-modifying therapies, it's very hard that we get the understanding and convincement of the public, of the policies, regulators, and of course, the population that early detection is relevant. So I think that is a key priority for any industry to prioritize investments on development and research. Of course, another role that is important in that regard, that I think industry play an important part of it, is generation of evidence that robustly can make streamline the assessment from regulators and approvals very quickly. So this is something that we cannot shame out from doing, and that is the particular role the industry plays. Of course, as well, we are proud today to partner, to collaborate, and to support all initiatives that today are research-based, like the ones mentioned today, DIA Union, Identify, FRIDA. Without them, we wouldn't have all the knowledge and evidence that we have today for making sure that the science can be translated in a practical execution of early detection, as it was mentioned. So Sanofi is highly supportive as well of all the call to actions that the EUDF is doing to make sure that Europe is on the forefront of being ready to secure equitable access to these disease-modifying therapies, but mostly as well to make sure that early detection become a standard practice today. So I think that is the key piece, not only for clinical trials, for regulators, but mostly to make sure that people benefit in the early phases of the diseases from these therapies that are addressing the underlying cause of the disease. Thank you, Chantal, for the question.
Yeah, and again, it's not a huge market, and still you are engaging. And that to me is amazing. It proves that type 1 also gets under your skin. So Sanofi clearly involved, Lilly clearly involved, also coming now with disease-modifying therapy trials. So how do you see this field going forward?
Thank you, Chantal. Thanks for inviting me today and inviting Eli Lilly's point of view. I think that, as you say, type 1 diabetes, you have it under your skin. I'm a diabetologist by training. I did ped endocrinology as well. So this is very close to my heart for a long time. And it has been in the DNA of Eli Lilly also from the beginning with the partnership with the Toronto University in 1921, 1922, and eventually 1923. So type 1 diabetes is close to our heart. I think that we have the benefit of having also a team, a therapeutic area with immunology, where we have developed other treatments for immunology disease, and putting things together and knowledge together, it brings us also to go further for the treatment and disease-modifying therapies. And our research goes from beta cell function to islet cell therapies to immune treatments up to insulins, of course, and glucose sensing insulins. If I look now more practical into the details of what is in preparation, there is, of course, the impact of obesity on patients with type 1, looking at the benefit that the patients with type 1 can get from reducing insulin resistance and by losing weight and improving the impact of insulin treatment on their cells. That's the first thing. And the second is also the use of baricitinib in 2 new trials that are starting, and that hopefully will, in one trial, will delay the start of delay type 1, clinical type 1, and also might help preserve beta cell mass for treatment for patients that have a clinical diagnosis. So that these are the two pillars, and of course we are looking further into additional research areas, and we are partnering as well for a long time with Europe through IMI, which was IMI Sofia type 1, IMI Hyperresolve, and of course EUDF, and looking further into additional partnerships, because this is critical. And what EUDF has implemented is huge. And I think that this is the basis that will establish what can be done in Europe for patients for the screening, and also soon, hopefully, for the treatment. And we are partner with EUDF and partnering with you to also, and Carmen, around writing the guidelines to make sure that Europe has the means to implement and make sure that treatments are approved and access for the treatments is secured in all the countries, because approval without access, without reimbursement is not possible, I mean, for such a disease. So I think that this is also key, that we work together in order to make sure that access is possible.
Excellent. So disease-modifying therapies are coming. Many laboratories, industries committed to really bring them to fruition for people in early stage type 1 diabetes, people living with type 1 diabetes. Maddie, I will give the final word to you. How important is it to hear the voice of those living with type 1 in driving industry to really engage into this, call to action, early detection, and disease-modifying therapies? How important is it?
Enormously important. And I think much of what we've heard today is around strengthening capacity and strengthening that life sciences ecosystem, right? And that's to detect earlier, to treat better, and to support people living with type 1 diabetes. We all know, I think, that this requires both policy change and policy prioritization. And I think we also all know that this is an enormous challenge. It was somewhat reassuring to hear my colleague from Novo Nordisk earlier saying that, we need to understand people's experience. And it's a core part of my role to do exactly that. We recently ran a survey of over 2,000 people living with type 1 and type 2 diabetes across the world. The challenges they face is abundantly clear. 52% of people who we surveyed living with type 1 diabetes struggle to get the appointments that they need with their healthcare professional. 1 in 5 don't feel involved in their treatment decisions. 1 in 3 are challenged with understanding their current treatment regime, and 40% struggle to access the treatment that they want. These are enormous challenges in capacity to treat that we need to solve, and we need to work together and speak collectively as one voice, as Stina said earlier, to make this change happen now, so that when we are ready with these disease-modifying treatments in the future, that the path to accessing them is smoother for the people who need them the most. So I think it's enormously important to have these voices represented here today.
Excellent. So I think we have had an amazing meeting. When Bart told me that he had to refuse close to 100 people because the room was too small, I was thinking back, 5 years ago. Imagine having a topic of early detection, better outcomes on an agenda in the European Parliament. We could have done it in a room of 3 people. But now it's standing room only, and that's amazing. And it's amazing because all stakeholders are here, and all stakeholders really point the way. And the way is forward. We can now detect type 1 diabetes in an early stage. We know how to do it. We're investigating how to apply it in our different healthcare systems in Identify, but we know the big lines. We know we have to communicate to the general population, to the healthcare professionals. We need to re-educate them. We need to talk to our politicians. And we especially need the voice of those already living with this disease to push everybody forward and to bring the right messages also to industry, to really push them to engage in type 1 diabetes and disease-modifying therapies. Because I always said to, when I advise industry, the one that will cure type 1 will gain a lot of sympathy. It's just, a disease everybody wants to cure. So I think if we all work together, we will get there, and we will be able to detect early, prevent evolution to clinical stage 3 type 1 diabetes, and also find a cure for those living already with the disease. So thank you all for attending. We started 10 minutes late, but I took 2 extra minutes. But I want to leave the last word now to a person living with type 1 diabetes. And I want to thank you, MEP Flemming Hansen, for being so open. I've never seen such a courageous politician, honestly. So thank you very much for being here and for testifying. And I will give you the last word.
Well, thank you very much. It wasn't on purpose, all of it, I promise you. Anyway, thank you all for being here. This is very, very important. It's a very important topic. And as my assistant just said when I spoke to her a few minutes ago, we discuss MFF, we discuss climate targets, we discuss a lot of things that are way out in the future. But here we have something real and something that means something to a lot of people right now. So I think the discussion is very timely. I hope that we eventually and soon will get there with the early detection, with the cross-border relations between our healthcare systems. And maybe this should be one of these flagship projects that we can do all together and a little bit faster. So let us put the pedal to the metal and see if we can speed up a little bit in the European Parliament. Thank you very much for being here, everybody. It was a pleasure.